Hello and welcome back to Chapter 3 Notes on Process Costing. So now we're going to talk about how to calculate out that average cost per unit. So remember what we did, what we just went over. We went over the units, how to calculate the denominator in the average, which is going to be the equivalent units of production. And the way we calculate the equivalent units of production is equal to the units completed plus the equivalent full units in ending WIP. Now in the numerator, so remember the way to calculate an average, let me just back up. We're going to say total production cost divided by total units, right? And when I mean total units in the denominator, I mean the equivalent units of production, and here's how to calculate the equivalent units of production, the units completed plus the equivalent units in WIP. The numerator, the total production cost, is equal to the cost in beginning WIP plus the costs incurred in the current period, okay? Then, as well, I said we'll say the cost of the units transferred out is going to be equal to the number of units completed times that average cost per unit, okay? And we're going to have to calculate this average cost per unit, the cost per unit, which is just an average. We're going to have to calculate that separately for materials and for overhead, okay? So let's go through and look at our example. We have the balance in beginning WIP at Bing Rubber Company for direct labor was $135,000. During the month of March, an additional $650,000 of direct labor was incurred. 25,000 pounds of rubber were produced. At the end of March, 8,000 pounds were in ending WIP, and those were 50% complete. At the start of March, the company had 5,000 pounds of rubber that were 30% complete. Sometimes with these problems, it's easy to get overwhelmed because there's so much information in these problems, and you have to let the formula guide you in solving the problem. This last sentence is irrelevant to what we are trying to do. And it's irrelevant because we just say the cost in beginning WIP plus the cost, extra materials, labor, or overhead incurred during the current period divided by the units completed plus the equivalent full units in ending WIP. The number of units in beginning WIP, it doesn't matter. It's in there to see if you know what's relevant and what's not. In this case, it's not. Now, if we were doing first in, first out, then it becomes a different story, okay? But we're not. We're doing weighted average process cost, which is what your chapter covers. So we come over here and we say we're going to calculate the cost per equivalent unit. So we're going to say the cost, we're going to say our beginning labor was equal to our 135, and we're just doing it for labor, okay? Plus our labor incurred during March, which was equal to our 650, and then we can add the two, that gives us the 785. Okay, this becomes our numerator. Then we have to say our equivalent units, EU, equivalent units of production. So we'll say completed units, which is given to us, and that's going to be equal to our 25,000 pounds of rubber, right? 25,000 pounds of rubber right there. How many units were in ending WIP? 8,000 pounds. They were 50% complete, so that means equivalent units ending WIP, 8,000 times 50% complete, which gives me 4,000. So we have equivalent units of production equal to 29,000. Okay? So then we come over here, we take our 785 divided by our 29,000, okay, which gives us $27.07 per pound. So then if we wanted to know what is the cost of the units of that 25,000 pounds of rubber, what's the labor cost of these 25,000 pounds of rubber, what I would do is just go 25,000 pounds of rubber times 2707, and then that would give me the cost with respect to labor of units completed. Okay? So let's do another example problem where we say, come over here, it says, and this one's a little bit trickier. It says a company makes a single product using two processing departments. The product starts in Department A and then is moved to Department B when it's done. After being completed in Department B, is then moved to finished goods, okay? The company started 10 units in the production in Department A. All material was added. So this is key. This is telling you it's 100% complete with respect to materials. It says all material was added. But the 10 units were not all complete at the end of the period. Of the 10 that we started, 6 were 100% complete. They were done. 4 were incomplete. Each of the 4 was 100% complete with respect to materials, but only 25% complete with respect to conversion. Okay? Then we have our WIP Department A, we have our WIP Department B in terms of our T accounts. We can say, here's our total materials costs. That's what this is telling. Total conversion costs. Okay? So the first thing is we're going to calculate the equivalent units for Department A. So we're going to say, remember what we do is we say how many units were completed is 6 with respect to materials. 6 were finished, total. Plus, then we have 4 that are partially complete, right? They are incomplete. But with respect to materials, all 4 were done. So I'm just going to multiply that times 1 for 100%. That gives me 10. Then I do the same thing for conversion. How many total were complete? 6 plus 4, but with respect to conversion, they're 25% complete, which gives me 7. Then I say, what's the cost of each unit that was completed in Department A? With conversion, I say, well, $40 divided by the 10 gives me 4. Over here, I say $14. This is my numerator. This is my total conversion cost. That's what this is. Divided by the 7 equals 2. So the total cost per unit is 6. The average cost per unit is $6. Now we say, show the transfer of the cost of the 6 units that were completed in Department A, showing them move to Department B. Okay? And then we're going to calculate the balance and ending WIP with respect to Department A. So we'll look at this in terms of our T account. We'll come over here, and we have WIP A, and we had our 40, and we have our 14. Now the cost of those units that were transferred from WIP A to WIP B, right, is $6 per unit times the 6 units gives me 36. Okay? And then in terms of my journal entry, I'm going to debit WIP B, 36, credit WIP A for 36. Now to go through and figure out, now if I come over here, I take the 54 minus the 36, and that gives me $18 left over. Okay? 54 minus 36 gives me 18. Now, I'm going to go through and do a proof on this, okay? I'm going to go through and manually calculate out the ending balance here for WIP A. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to say, the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say WIP A, I'm going to say equivalent full units for materials times the cost per unit for materials. Now, if you look on the prior page, remember what we say is that the equivalent full units with respect to materials was 4, because we had 4 that were left over, and I'll write that in ending WIP. Okay. How many units are in ending WIP? 4. They are 100% complete with respect to materials, so I have 4 total in ending WIP, right? That are 100% complete with respect to materials, times the cost per unit with respect to materials, which was $4, that gives me $16. Okay? I come over here and I do the same thing for conversion. EU full units conversion in ending WIP times cost per unit for conversion. Okay? So how many equivalent units do I have in ending WIP? Remember, I had 1 because I had 4 units, 25% complete. And the cost per unit, if you look on the prior page, with respect to conversion was 2. 16 plus 2 equals 18. Checks out. And that's where we got that 18. Okay? So the way to figure out the cost of the units that are still in ending WIP, you take the equivalent full units with respect to materials and conversion, and you multiply it times the cost per unit with respect to materials and conversion, add them up, and you get 18. or we could come over here and say the total costs incurred, okay, minus the total cost transferred out gives us the cost of ending. Okay? So let's look at that example. We have another example right over here on the Halsey sailboat. They make small sailboats, okay? During the most recent month, the following activity was recorded in the whole fabrication department, okay? For conversion costs, and this is only conversion costs. Determine the conversion cost for units in any WIP, and then the conversion cost of those units transferred out. So I have my work in process, 15,000 units. I don't even need to know that. It's in there just to see if I know what's relevant, what's not. Units started in production, 180,000. Units transferred out, I need to know. Units in ending WIP, is 20,000 units. I do need to know that. Work in process beginning, I need to know this. I need to know the dollar amount. And then the extra conversion costs incurred during the month. So the first thing is, remember, I'm going to say my beginning WIP costs plus costs incurred divided by units completed plus equivalent full units ending WIP. Okay, so our work in process beginning costs 24,000 plus the 338, which is my extra conversion costs incurred, divided by how many units were completed. Well, it says transferred out means completed. So it's 175,000. Plus how many units are in any WIP? 20,000, but they're 30% complete. So when you do the math, this gives you 362 divided by our 181, which gives us $2 per unit. That's the average cost per unit. Okay? So now we want to figure the cost of the units transferred out. So in order to figure the cost of the units transferred out, I first have to figure out what's the average cost per unit. And I have to do the same thing. I have to first do this to figure out the cost of the units at ending WIP with respect to conversion. So I'll say cost units out would be equal to the number of units that we've transferred out times the cost per unit, which comes over here, and that gives us our $350,000. And then the cost units ending WIP would be equal to our 6,000 units. Remember, it's equivalent full units in ending WIP with respect to conversion, or also if we had materials, you'd also have to do this for materials, times the cost per unit. Okay? That's the answer. I'm going to end this lecture video here, and in the next one, we will cover the production cost report and do a little bit more practice with this, and then talk about some additional points. Thanks.